Hello, you guys. What is up? Welcome back to another episode of Killer Instinct. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you're new here, hi, my name is Savannah, and I am your host of Killer Instinct. Before we get started, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you never miss an episode. We post weekly here on the podcast every single Wednesday, and you are not going to want to miss it. We also upload the video version onto YouTube on Wednesdays as well, so make sure you are subscribed. Now, as you guys can tell by the title of today's episode, we have a wild case to dive into today. If you've been keeping up, you would know that for the month of August, we have dedicated the true crime category to female killers. Now, today's female killer case is different than any other that we have covered this month because even though the woman that we are talking about today did not physically commit the act of the kill, she still found herself receiving a first-degree murder charge and a life sentence in prison for being the mastermind behind it all. The woman that we are talking about today is named Tausha Fields, and without giving anything else away, let's jump right on into it. Tausha Fields was born on August 30th, 1975, and Tausha was the type of woman who came across as the all-American girl. On the outside, she seemed sweet, nice, and kind. Tausha was also a single mom. She had a young daughter who she was raising on her own, and to be quite honest, this is a time in these cases that we cover where I like to give you the backstory of the person that we're talking about. I like to give you all of the background information, what led them to where we are today and what led them up to what happened in these cases that we talk about. However, with Tausha, there really isn't a lot of information out there about her upbringing, about her childhood, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that we don't know what's true and what is not. Tausha had built a life on telling people lie after lie about herself, so much so that we do not know what the truth is out there. There really isn't a lot of information out there about that. So sadly, I can't sit here and give you an entire biography about her. So with that being said, we're going to jump to April of 2007 in Greenwood, Florida. Now, at this time, Tausha was working as a teacher's assistant at a daycare in Greenwood, and all of the kids at this daycare loved her. Tausha was known as the kids' favorite teacher. She was the type of teacher who was passing out candy to the kids. She would sit with them, color with them. She would play games with them. She would go outside with them. She really loved the kids, and the kids enjoyed being around her. Because Tausha had a young daughter of her own, she really did have this maternal instinct that a lot of children gravitated towards. Now, like I mentioned earlier, Tausha was a single mom, and at the time that she was working at this daycare center, she did pay some special notice to one of the single dads who would also be at the daycare and drop off his son every day. There was one specific man that Tausha had her eye on, and that single dad is named Dewayne Barrentine. Dewayne was a 25-year-old man at the time that he met Tausha, and at the time, he was a single father. Like I said, he was raising a 6-year-old boy all by himself. Now, Dewayne really was your all-American country man. He was known as a gentle giant. He's charming. He's funny. Those who were close to Dewayne said that if you were able to sit in a room with him for 30 minutes and not laugh, something was very wrong, because he was the type of guy that was always trying to make everyone else smile, trying to bring a positive energy into the environment that he was in. He was just overall a very upbeat guy. Now, like I mentioned, Dewayne was a single dad at the time, and for him, his main priority was always his son. He had said it himself, come hell or high water, he was going to be the type of man that was there for his son through and through, and that is exactly what he did. Now, one of the things that both Dewayne and his son wanted was a mother figure to come into the picture and complete the family. That was something where every night, Dewayne's son, when he was saying his prayers, he would always wish for a mom. He wanted someone to come in and fill that role. He saw all of his friends and their moms, and that was something that he really wanted in his life. And for Dewayne also wanted someone who could be his partner and his companion, and someone who could, again, be there for their family. So Tausha started paying some very special attention to Dewayne and Dewayne's son. It was said that whenever Dewayne would come and pick up his son from daycare, Tausha would always want to be in the room. She would always want to be nearby so she would be able to have a conversation with Dewayne, so she would be able to talk to him. Now, ultimately, this special attention led to Dewayne receiving Tausha's phone number one day when he went to pick his son up from daycare. Dewayne said that he arrived to the school to pick up his son, and one of Tausha's coworkers came up to him with a little piece of paper with Tausha's phone number on it. The coworker then advised Dewayne that Tausha wanted him to call her, and at first, Dewayne didn't really know what to think about this. Dewayne was very aware that this was not a call to discuss his son. This was not anything related to the school. This was Tausha's way of making the first move. And while Dewayne was flattered, he was extremely nervous. He claimed that on that night, he had to work up the courage to pick up the phone and call Tausha. But ultimately, he did. And that phone call was just the beginning. Dewayne and Tausha spent all night long talking until the sun came up the next day. They were talking for so long that Dewayne ended up calling in sick from work because he wasn't able to get any sleep and needed to rest throughout the day. Now, around lunchtime of that same day, he received another call from Tausha, who asked if he was home. And when Dewayne said yes, Tausha told him that she was coming over to see him. When Tausha arrived at the house, one thing led to another, and the two engaged in their first sexual encounter. Now, from there, the relationship between the two sped up very, very quickly, and the two became an official couple. Now, very quickly, Tausha stepped into the maternal role for Dewayne's son, and initially, this seemed like everything that both Dewayne and his son had been wanting. Tausha would write little letters into Dewayne's son's lunchbox when he went off to school and went off to daycare. She would also leave little love notes around the house for Dewayne. And again, Tausha and Dewayne had a lot in common. They both were single parents, and just as much as Dewayne's son loved Tausha, Tausha's daughter loved Dewayne as well. So much so that after only a month of seeing each other, Dewayne invited Tausha and her daughter to move into his house with him and his son so that the four of them can now become a family. Now, Dewayne did get a little bit of pushback from his friends and his family about this decision to move Tausha into his home. And a lot of that pushback specifically came from Dewayne's mom. Dewayne's mom was very worried that things were moving too fast, things were moving too quickly, and his mom, whose name is Lisa, was very vocal about the fact that she was not sure if this was the right decision. Once Dewayne told Lisa that this was what was going to happen, Lisa and Dewayne exchanged several text messages where Lisa expressed her concern. However, what Lisa did not realize was that Tausha was reading those same text messages, and reading those texts made Tausha very upset. So much so that Tausha drove over to Lisa's house to confront Lisa about the things that she had been saying. Lisa was very taken aback when she saw Tausha show up on her front doorstep. She said that she was not expecting things to be escalated to this degree, and Lisa reassured Tausha that this wasn't anything personal. Her concern for her son was not a personal attack on her, and that if it was true love that was between Tausha and Dewayne, then there was no need to rush into moving in together. There was no need to rush the relationship. But regardless, Tausha was very adamant that she was moving in with Dewayne, and there was nothing that Lisa was going to do to stop her. And ultimately, that is exactly what happened. Tausha and her daughter moved in to Dewayne's home, and now they were all a family of four. For the first few months of living together, things did did seem to be going very smoothly between Tausha and Dewayne and their kids. Everyone was getting along. They were all doing activities together. They really had presented themselves as this new family unit, and they were excited about what the future held. But things could only be too good to be true for so long before they started to unravel. And after several months of living together in July of 2007, this is when Dewayne saw his first red flag in Tausha. Now, in July of 2007, Dewayne claims that his son had a stomach bug. Now, Tausha told Dewayne that she spoke with a pharmacist who recommended that putting a laxative in Dewayne's son's water multiple times a day would help with his upset stomach. Now, at first, Dewayne didn't think too much of this because he trusted Tausha. He felt like Tausha wanted the best for his son, and also Tausha was saying that this is what the doctor recommended. And again, Dewayne is looking at Tausha as this maternal figure. Tausha also has a daughter of her own. He thought that Tausha knew what she was doing. So Dewayne gave her the green light, and Tausha began putting laxatives in Dewayne's 6-year-old son's water multiple times a day. So much so that she called it his magic water. That is the term she would use to bribe Dewayne's son to drink this water. But over time, because he was drinking an excess amount of it, Dewayne's son became very, very sick. He was pale, he was fatigued, sleeping all the time, so much so that Dewayne became worried about his son's condition and took him to the pediatrician himself and told the doctor about what Tausha and the pharmacist had recommended, told him all about this magic water. And that is when the doctor immediately looked at Dewayne and told him that it was incredibly dangerous and that his son could actually be poisoned by the amount of laxatives that he had been consuming. He told Dewayne that the magic water needed to stop immediately for his son's health and safety, and that is when Dewayne completely cut it off. And ultimately, his son started to get better. His condition got better and he was healthy again. Now, at the time, Dewayne says that he didn't think that Tausha was intentionally trying to hurt his son. However, after seeing how the rest of the relationship between Dewayne and Tausha played out, there are definite doubts about what her true intentions were. But the red flags did not stop there. Over the next couple months, Dewayne noticed that there were some things about Tausha, some things that she would say that just did not add up. It seemed like Tausha would constantly tell these stories about her life, say different things about herself, but there was never any proof to back these claims up. She would tell Dewayne what seemed to be these outlandish stories. For one, she said that she was the granddaughter of a federal judge who got blinded after a battery blew up in his face. She claimed that she was supposed to be receiving a hefty inheritance from this particular grandfather. However, Dewayne was never able to find any record of this being true. Tausha also told him that she had a degree in criminal justice. She said that she had a basketball scholarship. The list went on and on and on. But again, there was never any proof to back these claims up. Now, after all of these claims, Dewayne decided that he needed to take matters into his own hands and really see what the truth was about the woman who was living with him and his son. He ended up going online and searching Tausha's name into a public records website to see what information was out there about her. And when he did, Dewayne was shocked to see what these results were. Public records show that Tausha, who was only 30 years old at the time, had been married a total of 5 different times. Now, mind you, Tausha told Dewayne up until this point that she had never been married before. So to see that not only had she lied about being married in general, but the fact that she had been married 5 different times was very, very shocking. Now, immediately, Dewayne called Tausha and confronted her about the information that he had learned, and Tausha did confirm that she had in fact lied and that she had been married 5 different times. However, Tausha did claim that husband number 3 and husband number 4 were in fact the same man that she had just married on 2 separate occasions, and that man's name was Mitch Kemp. Now, while on this phone call with Dewayne, Tausha told him that they can continue having the conversation later when she got home that night. And when she came home later that evening, Dewayne claimed that she had broke down crying and she was profusely apologizing for lying. She then walked Dewayne through the timeline of her marriages and claimed that her daughter's husband was a man named Joe Morton. So she walked him through the entire timeline of each one of her husbands. She again said that husband number 3 and husband number 4 were a man named Mitch Kemp. And she also said that her daughter's father was named Joe Morton. So that was the information that she had given Dewayne at that time. Now, at this point, Dewayne did not know what to think. He knew that he could not fully trust Tausha at this point and decided to enlist his mom in some advice to help him with what to do at this point. Now, when Lisa heard about Tausha and how she had been married so many times and she had hidden that from Dewayne, she decided to take matters into her own hands. Lisa was convinced that Dewayne was still not getting the entire truth when it pertained to Tausha. She thought that things still did not sit right, and so because of that, she was able to track down Tausha's father. She was able to get his phone number and called him one afternoon. Once he answered the phone, Lisa explained how her son was dating Tausha and that she just had some basic general questions about her. And according to Lisa, Tausha's father responded by saying, quote, "Ma'am, I need you to never call back this number again, but tell your son I said run," end quote. Now, as you can imagine, Lisa hearing that warning from Tausha's own father was extremely unsettling, and she knew that she wanted to get the police involved to really figure out who it was that her son was dating. She drove over to the police department and spoke with the former police chief of the Mariana Police Department, a man named Lou Roberts, and asked if he would look into Tausha because, again, Lisa was worried that she was not exactly being honest about who she said she was. And at this point, Lisa's fears didn't only pertain to Dewayne. There was also a 6-year-old little boy that was involved in this, that was living with Tausha day in and day out. And Lisa wanted to make sure that both her son and her grandson were safe. Now, Lou reassured Lisa that he would look into Tausha and decided to go ahead and meet with Tausha himself. Lou began by following Tausha's car around and saw that she actually had expired tags on her car, which gave Lou a reason to pull Tausha over for a traffic stop. It just so happened that this was a coincidence that he was actually able to find something to pull her over with, an excuse to pull her over. And when Lou approached Tausha's car and expressed that she had expired tags, Lou claimed that Tausha had a very standoffish attitude. She was very harsh. Lou also said that it appeared as if Tausha was trying to play mind games with him to get out of a ticket. And Lou said that he knew better. And overall, he said that the encounter was unpleasant, but he did have to let Tausha go. He could only pull her over for the expired tags traffic stop. Now, shortly after this traffic stop, this is when things took a turn for the worst. One afternoon, Dewayne ended up receiving a phone call from Tausha, and when Dewayne answered the phone, Tausha was on the other line absolutely distraught, saying that she was in the car with an ex-boyfriend of hers named Keith, and that he had appeared to have overdosed on drugs. Now, Dewayne immediately drove over to Tausha with a million questions running through his mind, but before he was able to get any answers, he knew that he needed to get help for Keith. Now, luckily, Keith was able to recover from this, and Dewayne drove him back to his truck later that night and really used this as an opportunity to ask Keith more questions about Tausha and her marriage history. Tausha was not in the car during this conversation, and Dewayne knew that if anyone was going to have some other answers in regards to Tausha, it was more than likely going to be her ex-boyfriend. Now, Dewayne asked Keith if he knew about Tausha's most previous ex-husband, a man named Joe Morton. Again, this is the man that Tausha claimed was her son's father. Now, Keith said that he didn't know anyone named Joe Morton. That name did not ring a bell. However, he did know that a man named Greg Morton was Tausha's most previous ex-husband. So Dewayne knew him as Joe Morton, and now Keith is knowing him as Greg Morton. But that was not all of the information that Keith disclosed. Keith also told Dewayne that one night while him and Tausha were drinking, Tausha disclosed to Keith that she had gotten her ex-husband husband Greg to murder another man for her in Missouri. Now, as you can imagine, when Dewayne heard this, it completely stopped him in his tracks. He was absolutely shocked at what he heard and did not know whether or not this was the truth, did not know whether or not to believe this. And Dewayne asked Keith if he believed that to be true. However, Keith claimed without a shadow of a doubt that he did not believe that Tausha was able to do something like this. He claimed that Tausha lied more than anyone that he ever knew, and that because of that, you couldn't believe anything that came out of Tasha's mouth, which is why Keith did not believe her on this claim. Now, at this point, things are getting worse and worse in the relationship between Tausha and Dewayne. It had gotten to the point where Tausha had become physically violent with Dewayne. She had put her hands on Dewayne multiple times at this point, to the point where she was leaving bruises on him. There were also odd instances that were taking place around Dewayne's home at the time that were inexplainable. For example, Dewayne's son had been given a puppy by his uncle, and one day that puppy mysteriously vanished without a trace, and it is believed that Tausha could have had something to do with that. All in all, the relationship was hanging on by a thread, but the straw that broke the camel's back was coming. Like I mentioned in the beginning, Tausha had previously worked as a teacher's assistant at a daycare. However, she had changed jobs and now she was working at a local hospital. Now, one day when Dewayne went to that local hospital to visit Tausha, he ran into an old coworker of his, coincidentally. And unfortunately, this old coworker had the job of breaking some pretty devastating news to Dewayne. This old coworker told Dewayne that Tausha had been secretly seeing another man who was a cop, and the two of them were seen getting into this cop's car earlier that day. Now, the reason this old coworker knew this was because he also was working at the hospital as security at the time, so he was able to watch from a distance as this affair unfolded. Now, with everything that had been happening leading up until this point, Dewayne knew that this was the final straw and that he needed to end the relationship with Tausha. Not only were the lies endless, but now she was accused of cheating on him. She had also put her hands on him in the past. It was a snowball effect that led to this point, and Dewayne knew that he needed to end it. And later that night, that is exactly what he did. When Tausha came home later that evening, Dewayne broke things off with Tausha, who was definitely not happy about the breakup. She got incredibly angry. She started yelling and screaming at Dewayne, throwing objects around the house before leaving with her daughter. Later that night, after Tausha left, Dewayne ended up logging on to his computer, and this is when he realized that Tausha was still logged on to her MySpace account on Dewayne's computer. So now Dewayne had access to her entire MySpace, and he was able to go through her messages on her MySpace account and found several messages that were slightly alarming. Tausha had several messages from a woman named Michelle Kemp, and in the emails, Michelle was asking questions like, "Is this Tausha Kemp? We've been trying to get in touch with you guys. Please just let us know that you're okay." Now, it was clear to Dewayne in these messages that whoever was sending them, it was someone who was looking for either a family member or trying to get in contact with their family member. And that is when a light bulb went off in Dewayne's head, and he remembered that one of Tausha's ex-husbands was named Mitch Kemp. Now, again, the woman that was sending these messages was Michelle Kemp. They shared the same last name, and Dewayne figured that this was probably in regards to Mitch Kemp. Now, after Dewayne put those puzzle pieces together, he then remembered the conversation he had with Keith, where Tausha took responsibility for another man's death, for getting another man murdered. And Dewayne wondered if that man could have been Mitch Kemp. Now, at this point, Dewayne changed the username and password to Tausha's MySpace account. That way she would not be able to get back into it. And then he reached out to Lou Roberts, the sheriff at the police department at the time, and told him about his findings. This is when Lou Roberts decided to reach out to the Boone County Sheriff's Department in Missouri. And that is when they were able to confirm that there was a missing persons report filed for Mitch Kemp several years prior, and that he was still missing to that day. So what Lou Roberts first learned was that 4 years earlier, in 2004, Detective Tom O'Sullivan met with Mitch Kemp's mother and his brother when they came into the Boone County Sheriff's Department to report Mitch as a missing person. Now, at the time, Mitch's family hadn't heard from him in months. However, what Tom O'Sullivan learned was that Mitch did have a warrant out for his arrest for some stealing charges, and O'Sullivan thought that it could have been very possible that Mitch could have been on the run because of this arrest warrant that he had out. Now, while his family couldn't deny that that could have been a possibility, they knew that Mitch would have at least called them or gotten in contact with them some way to let them know that he was okay. His family gave police an address in Pensacola, Florida, saying that if he wasn't at his home, this really was the only other option that they knew of where he could possibly be. And Pensacola police went to that address to do a wellness check. However, Mitch was not there. Now, that really was the extent of the search efforts in 2004. Barely anything was done at that time because, again, police were confident that Mitch was running away on his own will, that he was on the run, running from this warrant for his arrest. And so his name wasn't brought up again until 4 years later in 2008 when Dewayne made that discovery in Tasha's MySpace account. Now, interestingly enough, Mitch's family throughout those 4 years had consistently told police that if anyone knew about what had happened to Mitch, if anyone knew about where he could have been, it would have been his ex-wife, Tausha. However, police never followed up with that lead at the time. So then 4 years later in 2008, when all of this resurfaced again, that is when Lou Roberts heard that Mitch's family was suspicious about Tausha from the very beginning. So I want to take a moment now and talk about who is Mitch Kemp. Mitch Kemp was born on September 15th, 1964 in Fulton, Missouri, to his parents, Carol and David. His family moved to Mexico in 1970, where he attended school and graduated from high school there as well. Now, while there, he was very passionate about sports. He was athletic. He was on the football team as well as the wrestling team. From a young age, Mitch was taught self-discipline and hard work, not only from what was required from him from his athletics, but he also worked 2 jobs in high school, one at a local restaurant and another at his family's flooring business. Now, his mom, Carol, described Mitch as being a master of all trades, saying that he could do anything that he set his mind to. When Mitch wasn't working, he spent a lot of time being outdoors. He absolutely loved outdoor activities like fishing, camping. He loved all of it. After high school, Mitch stopped playing sports. However, he still loved watching them on TV. His favorite was NASCAR races. And as far as his relationships and his love life went, Mitch was married twice, once to Tausha and once to another woman. And collectively, he had 3 children. Tausha and Mitch met shortly after Mitch had gotten out of a long-term relationship, and Mitch was a lot older than Tausha. At the time, Tausha was only 26 years old when she met Mitch, and when Mitch's family first met Tausha, they felt like Tausha was a very sweet girl. She seemed like the girl next door, and the relationship seemed to be heading in the right direction. Now, Mitch's family did notice that things in the relationship seemed to be moving at a relatively fast pace. And this fast pace resulted in the two of them moving in together rather quickly and having a daughter together. Now, again, as we mentioned earlier, Tausha told Dewayne that the father of her daughter was a man named Joe Morton. However, that was another lie because the father of Tausha's daughter was Mitch Kemp. Now, after Tausha gave birth to her daughter, this is when it was said that Tausha's true colors really started to show, and Mitch and his family believed that Tausha was not who she first portrayed herself to be, and the two of them split up in 2003. Now, Mitch's family said that after the relationship, they really felt like Mitch had lost a part of himself. They felt like he wasn't as playful as he used to be. His interests and his priorities began taking a back seat to what Tausha wanted while he was in the relationship, and they claimed that she was very, very manipulative. Now, they did go through a phase of getting divorced and then getting back together. It was a very on and off relationship. However, after getting married a second time and after 8 months of marriage, Tausha ended up moving out of the home and took their daughter with her. And then shortly after that, she met her fifth husband, Greg Morton. So, again, I just want to clarify Joe Morton is not a real person. Joe Morton is Greg Morton. That is the alias that Tausha was using when she was talking about Greg. She gave him a different name. However, his real name is Greg Morton, and he was not the father of Tausha's daughter. Greg Morton was a man living on a farm in Columbia, Missouri, who worked in construction. Now, similar to Tausha, he had just gotten out of a relationship when the two of them met, so they had that in common, and they fell for each other fairly quickly, which definitely seems to be the pattern with Tausha. She seems to find these men and move at a very, very fast pace throughout all of her relationships. Now, after several weeks of dating, Tausha and Greg moved in together and got married, making him husband number 5. Now, because Tausha did have her daughter that she shared with Mitch, she did keep in contact with Mitch over the course of her relationship with Greg when it pertained to their daughter. Mitch absolutely loved his daughter and tried to be as active in her life as much as he was possibly able to and as much as Tausha would allow him to. Now, according to Mitch's mom, she said that the last time that she saw Mitch was when she dropped him off at Greg's farm so he could visit with his daughter. But again, this was the last time that she saw him. Now, obviously, with this information coming to light again, police knew that they needed to speak to Tausha. Now, after all of this information about Mitch and his disappearance was coming up, they needed to talk to her. However, the problem is at this time, they did not know where Tausha was. At this point, it was about a month after her and Dewayne had broken up, but no one knew where she was living. Police questioned Dewayne, asking where he thought she could have been, and this is when Dewayne told police that Tausha did have a friend named Zach. And after Dewayne searched for Zach online, and that is when he was able to figure out that Zach lived in rural Alabama. And after asking some people who knew Zach, they were able to confirm that Tausha and Zach were living together. Again, this was only a month after she broke up with Dewayne. Now, police were able to get Zach's address, and they went to the home, and they did in fact find Tausha, and they brought her down to the police station to answer some questions. Now, when sitting down with police, detectives asked Tausha about Mitch and where he was. However, Tausha initially claimed that she did not know anything. She said that she didn't know where Mitch was, she hadn't heard from him or seen him in years, and this version of the story went on for several hours. Tausha was denying absolutely everything and was not very forthcoming whatsoever about the information that she did know. She did not want to talk at all, and police knew that she was withholding information. Now, once police started giving Tausha the information that they did know, Tausha definitely felt backed into a corner, and ultimately she changed her story. After her initial story of telling police that she did not know where Mitch was or what happened to him, she then completely did a 180 and told police that Greg Morton, her 5th husband, shot and killed Mitch Kemp. She said that Greg shot Mitch when he came to the farmhouse to see their daughter, and that Greg buried him on his farm. Tausha went on to say that Greg told her that him and Mitch got into an argument when Mitch was at the house and Tausha was picking up her daughter at daycare. She said that she learned about Mitch's death later when she arrived home that day, and she claimed that Greg threatened her by telling her that if she ever were to say anything about Mitch's death, that Greg would not only kill her, but her daughter as well. She really painted Greg as this spiteful, evil, and terrifying human, and she said that she was absolutely horrified of what Greg was capable of. Now, at this point, detectives did not have enough information or evidence to arrest Tausha, so they did let her go. However, they did continue in their investigation. Several weeks later, police and Tausha went to Boone County, where Greg's farm was, and had her participate in helping search for Mitch's body. The farm was not in the original condition that it was in when Mitch was murdered, and so it definitely made it more difficult for police to try and locate his body. And once Tausha got onto the property, her story changed again, because now she was saying that she doesn't have any recollection of the murder at all. She wasn't sure where Mitch was. She didn't really know what happened to him. She didn't remember everything, and she was completely going against what she had initially told police. As you can imagine, this was very frustrating to the authorities at this point because they felt like Tausha was taking them on this wild goose chase. They felt like Tausha absolutely knew where Mitch's body was buried. However, she wasn't going to tell them because she didn't want to be held responsible for it. Now, at this point, police decided that they needed to switch tactics and they needed to speak with Greg Morton, who at this point was living in St. Louis. So they traveled to St. Louis to speak with him, and when they do, he refused to tell police anything. He denied any involvement or knowledge on Mitch's death. So now police have to go back to Tausha, and they changed their tactic this time. They told Tausha that Greg sold her out. They were using this as a scare and manipulation tactic to try and get Tausha to talk, basically to make it seem like Greg was putting all of the blame on her, hoping that Tausha would maybe tell them at least something that could help them locate Mitch's body. And surprisingly, this tactic actually worked, and Tausha agreed again for a second time to go back to Greg's old farm in Missouri and help police find Mitch's body, and that is exactly what they did. And this time, she did lead police to the exact spot where Mitch was buried. And when police dug the ground up, they did discover the body of Mitch Kemp. When the body was sent off to the medical examiner, they were able to confirm through DNA that this was, in fact, Mitch. The medical examiner also concluded that Mitch died from multiple gunshot wounds all throughout his body. And now that police had a body, they were able to go forward with an arrest. They initially arrested Greg Morton, who is now living in Alabama, but they were also able to get an arrest warrant for Tausha as well. They located Tausha in Dickinson, Texas, and took her to jail. When police arrested Tausha, she was living with another man at the time of her arrest. Now, from the beginning, police knew that Tausha was the real mastermind for Mitch's murder. When police were interrogating her after her arrest, she changed her story yet again. And just to give you an overview and a timeline of the story changes, initially, Tausha said that she didn't know anything. Then she said that Greg shot Mitch after the two of them had gotten into an argument when Tausha wasn't home. Then she said again that she didn't know anything and that she doesn't remember anything about the murder and that everything she said prior was not true. Then she said that she did remember where Mitch's body was buried and was able to take police to that exact location. And now she's saying that the real reason that Greg shot Mitch was because Mitch and Tausha were having an affair and that Greg shot Mitch in a jealous rage. She also told police that she was there when Greg shot Mitch, which is a detail she had conveniently forgotten up until this point. Now, with all of this going on, police were confident that they were never going to get a straight answer from Tausha. It seemed that every single time they spoke with her, she told a different story. She never told the same story twice. But luckily for police, Greg Morton had decided that he was ready to talk, and he wanted to tell them the real reason of why he shot Mitch Kemp. When speaking to police, Greg told them that the real reason that he shot Mitch was because Tausha told him that Mitch had not only raped her, but her young daughter as well, which again would have been Mitch's daughter. So Tasha's telling Greg that Mitch is a monster. He had raped her and her daughter. And while telling Greg this story, he claimed that Tausha begged him to do something about Mitch and to get him out of their lives forever. And at this point, Greg said that he was only trying to protect Tausha from who he believed was a horrible, horrible monster. But not only did Greg disclose that information, he also claimed that Tausha was the one that lured Mitch to the location of where his life was ended. According to Greg, Tausha told him that she was going to get Mitch over to the house and lure him into the back of the farm where she wanted Greg to be there ready to shoot him. And according to Greg, that is exactly what happened. Greg said that once Tausha brought Mitch to the back of the farm, he shot him multiple times until he was dead. Now, Greg did say that after he shot Mitch, Tausha was actually upset with him because Greg did not prepare properly. She said that she was upset that Greg did not have a shallow grave dug up or something to move Mitch's body at that point. Greg said that Tausha was confident that she would be able to use her charm and manipulate Mitch into following her onto Greg's property. Now, I do want to mention that police said that there is absolutely no evidence to prove that Tausha or her daughter was ever raped by Mitch. There was no evidence to prove that Tausha had ever been sexually assaulted by Mitch. There is no evidence to show that Mitch ever sexually assaulted Tausha or his daughter. And I want to make that very, very clear. Police believe that the real reason that Tausha wanted Mitch dead was because she didn't want to have to deal with the custody battle between her and Mitch that they were going to have to go through after the divorce. And ultimately, this is what ended up happening. Now, this case did go to trial. And during the trial, the prosecution argued that Tausha used her charm, used her manipulation tactics, and ultimately was able to lure Mitch onto the farm and end Greg's life. The prosecution claimed that not only was Mitch a victim of Tausha's manipulation, but Greg was as well, because Tausha had made up this entire story painting Mitch as this horrible, horrible man who Greg needed to protect her from. Now, Dewayne also testified in the trial, and he explained the lies that Tausha told him, how she made up a bunch of different stories about her life and tried to portray herself as something she was not. Now, after the trial and after several hours of deliberation, Tausha was charged with first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and Greg Morton was also sentenced to 19 years for his participation in the murder as well. And that is really where we stand on this case. Tausha and Greg were sentenced in 2010, and in 2017, Tausha did file seeking a sentence reduction. However, she was unsuccessful. It was actually revealed that Tausha had filed her request 4 years past the deadline that she was able to do so. So again, her request was denied. I'm really curious to hear what you guys have to say about this case. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. I'm curious to know your thoughts specifically about the sentencing. Because again, as I mentioned in the beginning of this, Tausha was not the one who physically committed the act of the kill. That would have been Greg. However, Greg received a sentence of 19 years and Tausha received life in prison. Do you think that Greg deserved to be sentenced to a longer term? Do you think that Tausha should have been sentenced to a shorter term? Or do you think Greg shouldn't have been prosecuted at all for what he did? Or do you think Tausha shouldn't have been prosecuted? I'm very curious to know where you guys lie on this case. I know I personally have my own opinions on it, but I want to hear yours as well. So let me know in the comments below. But with that being said, you guys, that is all for me today. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Killer Instinct. Again, if you're new here, hi, my name is Savannah. I'm your host of Killer Instinct. Make sure you go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. We post weekly here on the podcast every single Wednesday. You're not going to want to miss it. I will be back next week with a brand new one for you guys. And until then, stay safe. Bye, guys.